the WWE Draft and the new championship that essentially was created as part of the return of the brand extension. Now, a former friend and a colleague of this program, Paul Esden, we talked a little bit on Twitter, and, he said he loves the ideas of the draft. The problem is just, what the problem is always, and this is just, a temporary kind of storyline deviation. It won't be too long before we're back to the rosters being together again, and that's just how it works. They invented the World Heavyweight Championship so we can have two belts, but hey, the idea, if you don't remember a world of WWE with two different belts and wrestlers on two different shows, then, well, you're probably 1 year old, because that is a thing, and that's been a thing for almost 20 years now, back and forth and here and there, but we're doing it again.
You know what's interesting about the draft is it's like I feel like this because I obviously, me as a big football fan. Anyone that listens to us and watches us every week, every once in a while you'll see me talk some Cowboys or different things. To me, it feels like the draft is riding off the coattails of the draft, which is the NFL draft. I just thought that was funny of the timing. Like, why couldn't they have done this at a different time?
Well, that wasn't a coincidental timing. Triple H and a lot of the people in WWE made a point to say that wasn't a coincidence.
I don't believe it at all. To me, I feel like it's riding the coattails of the draft.
That is why. That wasn't a coincidence. No, I'm saying it wasn't a coincidence. Meaning, they did do it on purpose.
Is that what they said?
Yes.
Okay, so that's okay. Just to clear that up. Okay. Because I'm like, dude, why are we doing this? And I know that obviously the NFL draft was what it was this past week, and then we obviously had the WWE draft. This, just following up with it. To me, it's like, why would you ride the coattails of something else? Why don't you do a draft later on, like other leagues do drafts throughout the year?
Well, because the WWE. Okay, so a good example of that, right, is because if the NFL draft is currently going on, and that obviously is getting the mainstream attention of the world, then the WWE essentially doing a draft. Because people forget, outside of the NFL draft, I don't watch the NFL draft, but outside the NFL draft, I know that's like the big, like you said, the draft, right?
The draft, yeah.
So, when WWE kind of does it, it gives people a chance to kind of relate a little bit, like, oh, WWE's doing the draft. It's the same reason that, all the car dealerships and mattress companies do their March Madness sales in March around, idea of the NCAA tournament.
But my point
is because, people kind of get that. Oh, 64 teams, 64% off.
Do you want to know something? You don't want to know how I would like to see them do it? Is I would like to see them do it like when they start the brand new year, so to speak, in WWE, not like January.
When does the brand new year start? So after WrestleMania?
After WrestleMania, let's get right into the draft. And you're like, okay, because they teased it. Hey, these rosters will be in effect on the Monday Night Raw after Backlash, and it's like, okay, why couldn't we have done that when wrestling fans know, especially fans of the WWE in particular, that, just because it's, the new year for everybody else is January, but the new year in wrestling is, okay, the day after WrestleMania.
Yeah, but I think when it comes to the night after WrestleMania, they kind of want to just feed off of the energy that was WrestleMania right then and there.
Why not keep that train moving? That's what I'm thinking. Like, and here's the thing. Yeah, because here, think of it this way. Hear me out on this one.
All right.
So the Monday Night Raw or the SmackDown after WrestleMania, usually what happens? Ooh, somebody's back we haven't seen in a while. So here's that. You could use that like
they draft a surprise.
Yeah, draft a surprise.
They drafted AJ Styles, and boom, there he was.
Which was, I thought that for me, like, I thought he should have gotten more of the pomp and circumstance.
I think when they drafted him, they should have said, and here's one thing I think that they should add in that element that you're speaking of, is when they say, like, let's say a surprise draft pick. The next draft pick is the music hits. And then they come out. That kind of thing.
I agree. I think if you add that layer to it, I think that's cool. I don't like the fact that they take so much from the other, like NBA, the NFL, where it's like, but I'm sure they put their own little spin, like, all right, picks 1 through, like 4, like they do, like it's different, but it's not, because you still have somebody come out on the podium and say, all right, when Raw selects. I think what they should do is they should have some, especially not even just for surprises, but just in general, like, hit their music. Like, I like what they did with NXT though. I will say this.
I will say one thing that's unique about this draft versus the drafts they've had in the past is the drafts in the past at least had leaders for those brands. There was like a general manager for Raw, general manager for SmackDown.
Yeah, they're just special
this one was very interesting because who are we supposed to believe are making these draft picks for these brands? Who's I mean, is it just Triple H essentially? Is that who we're supposed to believe? Kayfabe is the one.
You're supposed to believe that it's the networks like Fox and USA. Yeah,
I mean, they did that also in the past, but again, this was kind of just like people coming out and making picks. But like, who are we supposed to believe Raw is as an entity, as a person? USA Network, I guess. Because I mean, they didn't ever make that clear. In the past, you had Teddy Long, you had
we had Teddy
Eric
Long
Bischoff.
this past week.
Yeah. I mean, you had Teddy
Bischoff
Long
too. Yeah.
But I mean, but in the past, you had Bischoff versus Teddy Long, Stephanie McMahon, Paul Heyman. You had these people who were the general managers, who were the ones you would see talking in the back, being like, "I'm making the draft pick. This is my choice. Who I want for my show." Like like a general manager.
So the kind of how I look at it, it's a different approach to how they pick, make the picks or make these selections. Is I think what they're trying to show the audience, because you saw it, because you'd see like Road Dogg leaves the room, and they get people the impression like, okay, he just came out of that big meeting, quote unquote, with the executives from the network. All right, Road Dogg, this is who we want. Go out there and make the selections for us. It's to me, and we were texting too, and we were, I think maybe on Twitter. I called it chalk because the first handful of picks. Even on SmackDown night one, I'm like, this is so predictable. Like, okay, we know Roman Reigns is going to be the top guy. It's like, to me, I just kind of, to me, it was a little predictable. But I did like the way they integrated the NXT people. I was surprised by some of the names that
NXT was
called.
The most surprising element of it all, because of the fact that obviously they selected some champions over there as well, which is in the past that's not how necessarily it worked when it comes to NXT call-ups. You lost the belt.
I didn't see
Braun Breaker did not get drafted.
I'm still trying to figure that one out.
Like the women's tag champs or Indy Hartwell, who was the women's champion. Normally you lose the belt and then you come over. So it was kind of an interesting element to see the current champions and like, what are they going to do with that? Are they going to just drop the belts? Which it looks like some of them are.
To your point, so the what is it, Alba Fire, and I forget the other girl's name, Isla or something.
Yes,
Isla Dawn, I think it is. So they're the NXT women's tag champs. So they were facing this past week. I remember her. She was Katanya Chance. She changed her name.
Yes, who also got drafted, but they also got drafted.
And that's to my point. So like they were
Kaden Carter and Katana Chance.
Yes, they were leading up to Tuesday night show. Like, okay, they're not tipping their hand because they both got drafted. You know what I mean? So because what happens, I've seen too many times is the WWE tips their hand like, all right, we know they're going to drop the titles on NXT this week. A little wink, wink. It just kind of loses the surprise. So I like the way that they drafted both sets of competitors to different, obviously not different brands. So that means they're doing the finality of that rivalry to this point.
Another sneak peek of and I swear, I promise you, at home, it is partly laziness and is partly having not a lot of the creative skills when it comes to my literary mind. But someday when the book does drop, the 1,001 Ways, and I feel like as time goes on, it's going to become a little more meaningless because wrestling obviously at one time was more mysterious and way more mysterious than it is nowadays. But one element that I'm going to add in that book of 1,001 Ways that wrestling is fake outside of just the punches. And I will mention the WWE Draft. And Triple H, he mentioned some rules for the WWE Draft. One rule he did not necessarily mention, and apparently we can just do what we want, is draft multiple people with one pick. We're going, Roman Reigns, I get it. Okay. Cody Rhodes, I get it. The OG or the OC, sorry, the OC, right? Or the OG OC, and AJ Styles and Michelin, Mia Kim, and all that whole faction. We can just get multiple people, So essentially, like, why did Solo Sikoa get to go with Roman Reigns? I get to tag teams. I get it. If you want to make, if you did have kayfabe rules, that would still be fine. You can draft a tag team by itself. But it's funny because they would always talk about how tag teams were always at threat of getting broken up. And in the past, I remember, I think Bubba Ray and Devon Dudley got broken up, and they went their separate ways for a while. Or the Hardy Boys.
You know what tips your hand too on where teams were, especially not even just tag teams, but like just couples. So like, okay, like Becky Lynch and Seth Rollins are going to stay on the same show. So as soon as one is on one, all right, we know Seth's going to be here.
Yeah, but at least that's still following somewhat of a kayfabe rule. I mean, like the idea that some of these people are getting drafted together. Like I said, the fact that like Roman Reigns and Solo Sikoa, because to be honest with you, I understand that right now Solo Sikoa kind of always goes hands in hand with Roman Reigns, but let's be real. If we separated everyone, Jay and Jimmy Uso were separate people, okay? Montez Ford was separated from the street, and we literally went down the line and talked about the importance of everyone as an individual. Solo Sikoa would be high up there. I'm not saying to be the number one pick.
So did any tag teams break up? I don't think any tag teams
I didn't see any tag teams that broke up over this one.
They were selling. They're like, well,
they always sell that. Anybody, the Usos could be on different brands. Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn could be on different brands.
If you're, obviously, if you're gonna make it interesting, then do it. Like if you're teasing it,
well, they've done it before. Like I said, we've had that in the
Devon. Yeah, I get
in the past.
But I mean, currently,
this is like the 10th draft they probably had.
Well, that's the thing. Like if you're gonna tease it, at least get one of them to break up. Like maybe you don't want to break up the Usos because it's the Usos and how
could easily broke up Damage Control.
Yeah, you could have definitely Damage Control. That'd be a good thing for all three, to be honest with you. But I would say like the Street Profits. I think the worry I have with the Street Profits is, I think Montez Ford is ready to be a single star. I don't think Angelo Dawkins is there just yet. I think Angelo Dawkins, to me, which he has a lot of tools on his tool belt, I just think he's kind of like the second member of the Street Profits. Like everybody talks about Montez.
I think though, obviously they need to break up in order for them to really get there. I don't think it's going to be like a New Day situation where one of them is going to be like IC champion while they're kind of quote unquote still together. They need to do like a real formal breakup if they are going to ever have a time where they are on their own.
That'd be a kind of a cool way to build it because they've been a tandem for a while now. That's the thing I love about WWE. It's when these tag teams or these factions. Like I still remember the time when the Shield broke up. You know what I mean? Like you remember where you were when you watched that. Those are the kind of moments that I really enjoyed, and I was kind of hoping we would. I'm hoping we'll see some of that down the line. But at least from a draft pick perspective, why couldn't we have broken up at least one of these?
But again, teams?
Or leave the factions, the OCs together.
If for some reason, this was a real thing and they really put the hands of the draft into the executives of Fox and into the executives of USA Network, if this was an actual, real, legitimate draft, or even to pretend to be such, I mean, you wouldn't be able to kind of gloss over some of these, I guess, unfairnesses. So, like I said, Solo Sikoa, he is going to be something on his own very big, right? And right now I understand, like I said, he is with Roman Reigns. But if you were to do a top 100 WWE superstars, everybody separated from everybody else, like I said, rank Jay and Jimmy separately, rank Kevin and Sami Zayn separately, Solo Sikoa would be really high. So essentially by getting the number one pick and picking Roman Reigns and having Solo Sikoa, that's not like having Paul Heyman. I mean, he is a guy who is a legitimate person. It's like saying, oh yeah, I'm just going to have, Roman Reigns. Oh, and also the Usos. Why, I get the storyline they did with trying to speculate that they were going to be on separate shows for a minute. But I mean, that's the same thing, right?
Think about this with Solo. And this is my analogy. And obviously it kind of fits because he does a lot of the same moves and the mannerisms and everything. But Solo to me is this generation's Umaga. I think he has a chance to surpass the late Umaga. What he did in the business. I think Solo is on a trajectory that, like, even if Roman Reigns goes to Hollywood, Solo's going to be just fine. I think he's too good. And I want to go back to the factions really quick. I will be honest with you. I think without AJ Styles, I feel like Gallows and Anderson and Michin. I think they're kind of they're not really as important, I guess. Like AJ Styles is the glue that keeps that thing going.
No, they're not Imperium or anything. Without
Imperium
AJ
is one collective unit. Like nothing against Gallows and Anderson and Michin. To me, like it's like AJ Styles is way above all of them, and it's like without him, it's like, okay, do we really care about the OC?
Yeah, and this whole draft, I mean, it's interesting, but again, we'll see how long it goes. One thing I wish they would do, and I wish they would have kind of done it prior to the draft, because we have it with the world belts, right? Is that they have names. The Raw and SmackDown Women's Championship do not have names. So essentially, we have this impropriety and this kind of, asterisk in the record books every time we have these drafts because they just essentially switch titles. Yep. I'm the SmackDown champ until I just become the Raw champ, and I'm the Raw champ until I become the SmackDown champ. At least if we give these maybe like the world heavyweight title. I don't know. Give them some sort of names. You know what I mean? So like the Raw, like the IC and the US belt. Yep. Like example, it's not the Raw IC belt and the SmackDown IC belt. They have their own names. Yep. So when the US champion goes to one show versus the other, he takes that same belt. You don't do a belt swap with the other person. I just think that's kind of weird for the record books. Like if Austin Theory is the longest reigning U.S. champion, we don't have to say, until he got drafted and then he became the Raw U.S. champion and the SmackDown, like he is just the U.S. champion. Roman Reigns currently has those belts, right? And he's going to have those belts until he loses the belts. Obviously, we might condense it down into one belt with the invention of the new World Heavyweight belt. But like I said,
by the way,
for
how
the
do you
Raw
like that belt? I like that
I
belt.
mean, it looks like the old... here's the thing, too, and
nice.
I will say one thing about WWE, and one thing that's kind of annoying when it comes to this World Heavyweight belt, and not just this one, but all of them in general. They have quite the track record of it always being Raw that gets the new belt. I don't think SmackDown has ever gotten the new belt. Whenever they bring in a belt, when Brock Lesnar was the undisputed champion when this all got started, he went to SmackDown. The World Heavyweight belt was created by Eric Bischoff or brought in by Bischoff. Triple H got it, was just given it. There you go. All right, let's move along to the Universal belt. And I'm probably glossing over a few other instances, but the Universal belt, when that was created, because at the time, the WWE champion stayed on SmackDown.
Well, because it was Finn Balor.
Yeah, the Universal belt was created, was red for Monday Night Raw.
Yep.
This belt is created for Monday Night Raw. So whenever we have the creation of this like new belt, and I think Roman Reigns, again, was the WWE champion on SmackDown when the World Heavyweight champion was Brock Lesnar, before these belts got put together. So the World Heavyweight belt, or essentially the non-WWE belt, the one that's the brought back belt, the created belt, whatever have you, not the traditional one that goes back all the way, the one that they just reinvent, is always on Raw. Why is that? How come it's never the champion stays on Raw and we're creating a new belt for SmackDown?
Yeah, I don't understand that either. And actually, it actually brings me to an interesting point. And maybe you'll agree, maybe you won't. But my impression of the draft is SmackDown is way more loaded than Raw. Am I wrong on that?
Well, again, I don't necessarily think that it's way more loaded. I mean, they got the number one pick, but I always feel...
But that doesn't mean anything. You could have a lot of depth.
And I won't lie, I feel like SmackDown is always had, except for maybe originally, like when we're talking the 02 drafts.
Yeah.
I think other than that, SmackDown has kind of always been a little bit better. Even then, I remember SmackDown had, I think, Triple H, The Rock, and Hulk Hogan in like the first draft. So SmackDown always seems, I don't necessarily know why, but yeah, they always seem to have, Raw always seems to have more of, I don't know, the people who look like fit on Raw, the more mainstream stars, the John Cenas of the world.
Well, Drew McIntyre.
Yeah, seem to be on SmackDown. I know that John Cena got drafted to Raw, later on, a couple of years, I think 2005, after he was that champion. And I think that was probably a lull for SmackDown. And maybe, SmackDown had a pretty crappy roster. I want to say like 05, 06, 07, 08. But yeah, for the most part, SmackDown always has had the better.
Yeah. I will say though, the one perk of Raw is Walter. He is an Imperium is on Raw. That's nice. I like that. I'm looking at this. I mean, obviously you got Cody as the kind of the face of Raw, and you got Roman as like the face of SmackDown. I mean, to me, it's just I feel like SmackDown is just more top heavy. I don't know. That's kind of my feeling, and it probably makes sense because they have the tribal chief as the face.
And I won't lie. Like, so I one draft that I'm familiar with is fantasy football drafts, right? Where you draft existing players, similar to the WWE draft, because you're not drafting new people. It's not like, and that would be interesting in another term. And when the NXT call-ups happen, essentially it'd be like a draft. All the NXT people come like at once, similar to the way that all sports drafts work, where it's all newcomers. But fantasy football drafts are the existing people, similar to this, existing people. And one thing about fantasy football drafts is there's those certain draft picks that you're like, you don't really need to waste a high pick on them. You can just get whatever. You can get whatever nonsense tag team down the line. You can get whatever kicker in the terms of fantasy football draft down the line, because they're not going to move the needle. But in order of like fairness, or I don't know, just to keep things interesting. The shows that WWE Draft is a clearly scripted event where nobody is behind the wheel, because it's not Roman Reigns. Like, it is Roman Reigns goes 1, Cody Rhodes goes 2. Perfect. But then number 3 is never like Bobby Lashley, Brock Lesnar. It's always some nonsense. And a good example of that is how high some like we saw. We didn't see some good draft picks like, Imperium go until like, I would imagine they would have been number 3. Usos would have been number 3. Like those things, you would build, though, you would just get all of the top guys out of the way. No offense to any of the women, right? But the NXT Tag Team Women's Champions were picked like ahead of Becky Lynch. Like that kind of nonsense.
Yeah, that's a little weird for me. And you know what, though? There was a pick that may have surprised people, but I'm not surprised is how early LA Knight went. Like, he's getting over right now. He is so
I don't think he went too early. I think it was one of the later draft rounds, right?
No, he was on TV. He was early. He was early he was on TV because they did all the post stuff later on.
But I mean, so early in my eyes is SmackDown. I mean, he didn't get drafted until we got over to Raw.
But he was still, he was in the top, I think 4 rounds. I think it was 4 or 5 rounds. There's other wrestlers that they get announced later, so they didn't get any television time for it. Is what I'm saying. That's and LA Knight to me is one of those dudes where like he's 40 years old now, which is kind of like in wrestling, he's kind of right at the prime of his career because wrestling's a little different. Your prime for me is like mid to late 30s, maybe early 40s is kind of where your peak is for wrestling wise. I'm just hoping to see that. I'm hoping to see a big push for LA Knight. I mean, that looks good to me.
It's funny, we were looking all over for, the more comprehensive draft results. And early on, obviously, we're talking on Twitter how we provided them. So why wouldn't we just look at what we provided?
Well, of course.
The most comprehensive. So when you talk about LA Knight, he ended up going overall on for the draft. He went number 32. But like, I'm looking at things like this. Look at like Trish Stratus. I didn't even know that she was available. And that was an interesting aspect to me, is that Trish Stratus was going to now essentially be a full-time competitor, right? Trish Stratus is going number 29. If Trish Stratus is on the board, she's going, you're taking her ahead of Damage Control. You're taking her again of Alba Fire and Isla Dawn, right? Indy Hartwell. You're taking her probably ahead of that.
Yeah, those picks are weird.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just looking kind of like the Street Profits went number 5. You're telling me you wouldn't take Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn before you took on a real draft? You wouldn't if you're taking a tag team in a real draft. You're taking the world champion. Your second pick is taking the IC champion. The third pick is taking the tag team champions. The fourth pick is taking the women's champion. Like that's what you're doing. You're not picking Street Profits with the 5th overall pick and leaving or the Miz with pick number 12 and leaving what is it? Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn, the current tag team champions who main evented night 1 of WrestleMania. You're taking them 21. You're taking the Usos 22. If you have the option to take the Judgment Day, there's a faction for you right there. The Judgment Day is a faction of 3 people who could have all went separately. Pretty good. You're taking them number 23. If you have an opportunity, in a real draft, no lie, you're probably taking the Judgment Day almost number 1, because if they're saying that you can take Damian Priest, Dominic Mysterio, and Finn Balor as one sole pick, or you can take Cody Rhodes, I'm probably taking 3, in that aspect, if we're keeping with fairness.
I think WWE read the room wrong with the whole Judgment Day because they should have gone sooner.
Well, the reason is because you had SmackDown and Raw kind of operate as separate drafts. You had them get worse and worse as time went on.
Still.
And then to keep things sexy, when Raw kicked off, you didn't want Raw to kick off like the NFL draft where we're picking it up round 36. You wanted to pick it up Raw 1.
They should have been super early. And to be honest with you, if you watched any television lately, there's nobody that's over like Dominic Mysterio, dude. Like he is over, bro. Like he literally cannot get his lines out because he's literally the whole place is booing his freaking ass off, and it's like to me, like he has got more freaking heat than any wrestler right now. It's not even close.
I'll tell you some people who have fallen off the radar a little bit, and maybe, I mean, again, these would be a steal if this was legit. Braun Strowman and Ricochet, 2 people who would probably be in the top 5 a couple years ago individually, went together at number 33. Braun Strowman 5 years ago would have been number 1 in some drafts. Right, and the fact that he went with Ricochet, who would have been in a top 5 in some of those drafts,
to me,
together at 33.
I'm not a big fan of them as a tag team. I'm
not a big fan of them as a tag team. I'm just looking at the idea of taking them together.
Like to me, Braun, since he's been back, has kind of been disappointing for me. I don't know. I just kind of
and that's why I say it's like a steal, because if you separate them and actually put them out as individuals again, Braun Strowman's a world heavyweight champion contender, and so is Ricochet.
And in what world are you taking Rick Boogs over Cameron Grimes? I'm just saying. Like Cameron Grimes is the real freaking deal. They've been waiting way too long to call his butt up. He needs the.
And again, what obviously shows that this is illegitimate is because obviously you would be taking Braun Breaker. If all NXT is available, if somebody said all NXT is legitimately available with no caveats, wouldn't I be taking Braun Breaker like pretty high?
You would be taking him very high because Braun Breaker's pretty damn good. Last time I checked.
The NFL draft or the NFL draft. Well, the NFL draft is in the books, and the WWE draft is in the books. We will see how long this lasts. Obviously, what's next is brand exclusive pay-per-views until obviously we get to a point where feuds start to get old, and we start to see too many rematches and too many people facing off against each other we don't want to see. And with the problem with these brand exclusive pay-per-views is you got this exclusive, roster to go from, and it is pretty thin when you can have a more star-studded card. Hey, that's why I like going to WrestleMania, the Royal Rumble, because we're getting 4 matches in the Royal Rumble, 2 Royal Rumbles, 2 World Heavyweight Championship matches, and that's what you want to see. I don't want to go to a pay-per-view where you got 1 Heavyweight Championship match and then, you don't even a bunch of, filler.
No, here's the thing. I think the card's better than you're giving it credit for.
I'm not saying, we're not talking about Backlash. I'm just talking about in general, the draft. I'm talking in general, the idea of these brand exclusive pay-per-views, which are coming up, obviously in a matter of time.
This is probably the last of the non like the complete, like both dual brand.
Well, I don't know, because we do got some big shows coming up.
Well, besides
September. I probably say September. September, we're going to start the brand exclusive pay-per-views again, because and we'll get into, Backlash and all that in a little bit, but I think that's probably when we'll start to see these brand exclusive pay-per-views. I hope we don't, because every other time we've done it, it only lasts for so long, and as everyone has already predicted, and hey, even Paul Heyman predicted, maybe it's not too long before Roman Reigns has 3 belts, but it wouldn't make too much sense, because technically right now there's 2 World Heavyweight belts, because he has one of them.
Hey, there's also rumor circulating, which, it's the web. Everybody knows how the web and social media is. You can take that with a grain of salt. Well, there's this rumor making the rounds where Roman Reigns is not expected to drop his belt until September of 2024. I don't know why that date came in.
Belts or belt?
Dropping everything.
Because obviously I can imagine when the World Heavyweight title comes into existence pretty soon, Roman Reigns when he returns, I'm going to imagine comes back as a 1-belt champion. And maybe it's a redesigned 1-belt as well to kind of put together the lineage of the 2 belts. We've seen it before. Obviously, Daniel Bryan at WrestleMania in New Orleans holding up both belts. John Cena when he beat Randy Orton in a title unification match, holding up both belts. Triple H when he beat Chris Jericho, WrestleMania 18, holding up both belts. That's not the first time someone's had 2 belts, and it's not the first time before, and it's not the last time someone will have 2 belts.
Yeah, no.
But for now, it looks like 2 belts are going away again, and we're going to have them separately on each show. The WWE Draft, we will see this upcoming Monday. How it takes effect heading into the next pay-per-view, which is Night of Champions in Saudi Arabia.